Teacher spends weekends, tutoring struggling kids free, unaware parents pooled money for her dream car. The phrase echoed in Ellie Parker's mind as she drove her 15-year-old Honda Civic down the quiet suburban streets early Saturday morning, the engine wheezing with each acceleration. The irony wasn't lost on her, a high school English teacher who could barely afford to keep her car running, yet chose to spend her precious weekends offering free tutoring to kids who needed it most. The autumn air nipped at her cheeks as she stepped out of her car, clutching a worn leather satchel filled with worksheets she'd stayed up until midnight preparing. Ellie pulled her cardigan tighter around her slender frame, the fabric thin from years of wear. Her eyes lifted to the community center, a modest brick building with faded lettering and windows that desperately needed washing. But to her, it was a sanctuary of possibility. "Morning, Ms. Parker." The security guard, Mr. Coleman, greeted her with the same warm smile he'd offered every Saturday for the past 8 months. "You're the most dedicated teacher I've ever seen. Don't know how these kids got so lucky." Ellie's lips curved into a tired smile. "I'm the lucky one, Mr. Coleman." The words came automatically, and despite her exhaustion, she meant them. Inside, she arranged 5 desks in a semicircle, placing pencils, erasers, and encouragement cards at each station. Her fingers lingered on the last desk, the one where Jamie Wilson would sit. Jamie, with his brilliant mind and eyes that carried shadows far too heavy for a 12-year-old. The boy whose math grades had plummeted after his father's unexpected death 6 months ago. A lump formed in Ellie's throat. She understood loss in ways she wished she didn't. The sound of hesitant footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Kayla stood in the doorway, her braids adorned with colorful beads that clicked softly as she shifted her weight from one foot to another. "Am I too early, Ms. Parker?" the girl asked, clutching her backpack straps with white knuckles. Ellie's face brightened. "Never too early for learning, Kayla. Come on in." One by one, they arrived, 5 children from different backgrounds but united by common threads. Academic struggles, limited resources, and eyes that lit up when someone finally took the time to help them understand. Last to arrive was Jamie, shuffling in with hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. His mother, Sandra Wilson, lingered in the doorway. The dark circles under her eyes mirrored Ellie's own. "Thank you," Sandra mouthed silently before departing. Ellie nodded, a wordless understanding passing between 2 women intimately acquainted with grief. 3 hours later, as the session ended, Ellie felt the familiar ache in her lower back from leaning over desks, but it was eclipsed by something warmer: pride. Kayla had finally mastered long division. Marcus had written his first paragraph without a single grammatical error. And Jamie? Jamie had smiled. Just once, briefly, when he solved a particularly challenging equation, but it was enough to make Ellie's heart swell. As the children filed out, Sandra Wilson returned, this time stepping fully into the classroom. "Ms. Parker, I was wondering if I could speak with you privately." Ellie nodded, trying to mask her concern. "Of course." Sandra twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit Ellie had noticed months ago. "Jamie's birthday is next weekend, and I know it's a lot to ask, but would you consider stopping by? Just for a little while? You're the only one who's been able to reach him since John passed." The request hit Ellie like a physical force. In 8 months of tutoring, she'd maintained a careful professional distance, partly out of principle, partly to protect her own fragile heart. I don't usually—" "Please," Sandra's voice cracked. "He talks about you. Not much, but more than he talks about anyone else these days." The weight of responsibility pressed against Ellie's chest. She thought of her empty apartment, of the framed photograph face down in her drawer, of promises she'd made to herself after David. "I'll be there," she heard herself say. Sandra's relief was palpable. She scribbled her address on a scrap of paper, her handwriting shaky but determined. 3 o'clock next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just cake and a few relatives. But it would mean the world to him. After Sandra left, Ellie sank into her chair, the empty classroom suddenly too quiet, too full of echoes. Her gaze drifted to the window where her battered Civic sat in the parking lot, a visual reminder of the life she'd been trying to rebuild for the past 2 years. The drive home was accompanied by memories she usually kept locked away. David's laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the plans they'd made, including the vintage Mustang convertible they'd saved for, the one that was supposed to take them on cross-country adventures. The car fund that had instead paid for a funeral no 32-year-old should have needed. Her apartment greeted her with the same emptiness it always did. One bedroom, sparse furnishings, walls she hadn't bothered to decorate. Not a home, just a place to sleep between teaching days. Ellie kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, too tired to even make tea. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Maggie. "Dinner tomorrow? My treat. No excuses this time." Ellie typed back a quick agreement. Maggie worried too much, but after everything, Ellie couldn't blame her. Sunday dinner with Maggie became an unexpected intervention. "You're working yourself into the ground, Elle," Maggie said, pushing a glass of wine toward her sister across the restaurant table. "Full-time teaching, weekend tutoring for free, and I know you're still taking night classes for your masters. When do you breathe?" Ellie twirled pasta around her fork. "I breathe in classroom 112, and at the community center, and that's not living. That's existing." Maggie's voice softened. "David wouldn't want—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than Ellie intended. "Please, Mags. Not tonight. It's been 2 years. I know exactly how long it's been." Ellie set down her fork, appetite gone. "The tutoring, it helps. These kids need someone to believe in them. And who believes in you?" Maggie reached across the table, covering Ellie's hand with her own. "You've put your grief into helping others, and that's beautiful, Elle. But you can't pour from an empty cup forever." Later that night, as Ellie prepared Monday's lesson plans, her sister's words echoed in her mind. The truth was, helping these children had become her lifeline. In their progress, she found purpose. In their small victories, she found reasons to keep going. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, a parent of one of her regular students asking if she could take on another child, a 9th grader struggling with algebra. Ellie's finger hovered over the screen. Her schedule was already impossible. Her savings account was dwindling. The sensible answer was no. She typed, "I'd be happy to help," and hit send. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a persistent drizzle that matched Ellie's mood. Her Civic protested loudly when she started it, the engine coughing before reluctantly turning over. "Just get me to school," she murmured, patting the dashboard like an old friend. "That's all I ask." The car shuddered in response, but carried her faithfully to Westbridge High School, where she'd been teaching for 4 years. In the teacher's lounge, she avoided the concerned glances from colleagues who had noticed her perpetual exhaustion. Principal Dawson cornered her between classes. "Ellie, got a minute?" She nodded, following him to his office, mentally preparing for the worst. Budget cuts, schedule changes, more responsibilities with no additional compensation. Instead, he surprised her. "I've received some calls from parents in the community about your weekend tutoring." Ellie's stomach tightened. "Is there a problem?" "Problem? No." He chuckled. "Quite the opposite. They can't stop singing your praises. I knew you were dedicated, but I had no idea you were spending your weekends helping students who aren't even from our school." "It's nothing, really. Just a few hours on Saturdays." Principal Dawson leaned back in his chair, studying her. "It's not nothing to those families, Ellie. You're changing lives." The sincerity in his voice made her uncomfortable. Compliments felt like ill-fitting clothes these days. "I'm just doing what any teacher would do?" She deflected. "No," he said firmly. "You're doing what only the best teachers do, and I want to support it. What if we made it official? A weekend program through the school. We could provide the space, some basic supplies." "No," Ellie interrupted, then softened her tone. "Thank you, but I prefer keeping it separate. At the community center. It's more accessible for the families and—" She hesitated. "It's something that's just mine." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He'd been principal when David died, had attended the funeral, had given her all the time she needed even when district policy allowed far less. "Fair enough, but if you change your mind, or if there's anything the school can do to support you, my door is always open." The week passed in a blur of lessons, grading, and her Wednesday night master's class that left her both intellectually stimulated and bone-weary. Before she knew it, Saturday had arrived again, another tutoring session, and afterward, Jamie's birthday party. The morning tutoring went well, though Ellie noticed Sandra and Jamie were absent. A text message explained they were preparing for the party. After the other students left, Ellie returned to her apartment to change and wrap the gift she'd purchased for Jamie, a book on astronomy she'd noticed him poring over in the library, and a small telescope she absolutely couldn't afford but bought anyway. Sandra's house was modest but well kept, with cheerful mums flanking the front steps. Ellie's hands trembled slightly as she rang the doorbell, the wrapped package tucked under her arm. This was crossing a boundary she'd carefully maintained since she began tutoring. The door swung open to reveal Jamie, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Ms. Parker? You really came?" The simple wonder in his voice made her throat tighten. "I wouldn't miss it, Jamie. Happy birthday." She followed him inside, where a small gathering of family members sat in the living room. Sandra bustled out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Ms. Parker, thank you for coming." She embraced Ellie warmly, then whispered, "He's been watching the clock for an hour." The party was simple: cake, ice cream, a few presents. Jamie sat cross-legged on the floor, opening gifts with polite thanks but subdued excitement until he reached Ellie's package. The book elicited a genuine smile, but the telescope, a basic model, nothing fancy, rendered him speechless. "This is for me?" he asked, looking up at her with disbelief. "Your mom mentioned you've been interested in astronomy. I thought maybe we could add some science to our tutoring sessions sometimes." Jamie ran his fingers over the telescope reverently. "Dad and I used to look at stars." It was the first time she'd heard him mention his father voluntarily. "He'd be really proud of how hard you're working," Ellie said softly. Jamie didn't respond, but he didn't shut down either. Progress that made Ellie's heart ache with a bittersweet mixture of triumph and empathy. As the party wound down, Sandra walked Ellie to her car. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Not just for coming today, but for everything. Jamie was failing 3 subjects before you started tutoring him. His counselor was talking about holding him back a year. Now he's almost at grade level. He's doing all the work. I'm just giving him tools," Ellie insisted. Sandra shook her head. "You're giving him so much more than that. You're giving him hope." She paused, glancing at Ellie's car with its peeling paint and visible rust spots. "That doesn't sound like it's doing too well." Ellie patted the hood affectionately. "Old Reliable has a few more miles left in her. I hope. Well, if you ever need a ride to the community center, just let me know. It's the least I could do." The Civic managed to start after 3 attempts, and Ellie waved goodbye, her heart fuller than it had been in months. That night, as she prepared for bed, Ellie allowed herself to do something she rarely did. She opened her nightstand drawer and removed the frame she'd placed face down 2 years ago. David smiled back at her, his arms slung casually around her shoulders, both of them standing in front of a cherry-red 1965 Mustang convertible at a car show. "I met a kid today who reminds me of you," she whispered to the photograph. "Same curious mind, same kindness." Her finger traced the outline of the car in the picture. "Remember how we used to talk about finding one of these? All those road trips we planned?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but for the first time in a long while, they weren't solely tears of grief. Something else mingled with the sadness, a tentative warmth, like the first hint of spring after an endless winter. She placed the photo on her nightstand, face up. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in Ellie's tutoring sessions. She began incorporating more of herself into the lessons, sharing stories from her own struggles with math as a student, bringing snacks she baked herself, adding astronomy lessons for Jamie using his new telescope. The children responded enthusiastically, their progress accelerating as the connection deepened. What Ellie didn't notice was the parents, lingering after sessions, exchanging glances and whispered conversations. She didn't see Sandra Wilson showing them something on her phone, didn't hear their excited murmurs or witness the determined nods. One Saturday in late October, Ellie's Civic finally surrendered. No amount of coaxing could bring the engine to life. She called an Uber to take her to the community center, arriving 20 minutes late and flustered. "I'm so sorry." She apologized to the waiting families. "Car trouble." "Is it serious?" asked Marcus's father, a mechanic by trade. Ellie sighed. "Terminal, I think. 15 years is a good run for any car, but I was hoping for a miracle until I could save enough for something else." The parents exchanged knowing looks that Ellie was too distracted to interpret. That evening, Sandra called her. "I heard about your car. I'm so sorry." "These things happen," Ellie said, trying to sound more optimistic than she felt. The truth was, a new car was financially impossible right now. Her meager savings had gone to replacing her apartment's ancient refrigerator last month. "Listen, the other parents and I were talking. We'd like to help with transportation until you figure something out. We could set up a carpool rotation to get you to and from the community center on Saturdays." Ellie's pride bristled at the offer, but practicality won out. "That's incredibly kind. Just until I can sort something out." "Of course," Sandra replied, a curious lilt in her voice that Ellie couldn't quite place. The following Saturday, Marcus's father picked her up, asking detailed questions about her defunct Civic and her dream car, just out of professional curiosity. On the drive home, Kayla's mother did the same, wondering what features Ellie would prioritize in a new vehicle. By the third week of this arrangement, Ellie began to suspect something was happening behind the scenes, especially when Jamie casually mentioned during a lesson, "Mom says we're doing something special for you soon because of all you do for us." "Oh? And what might that be?" Ellie asked, raising an eyebrow. Jamie shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. "I'm not supposed to say. It's a surprise." November arrived with a sharp chill and early darkness. Ellie had resigned herself to public transportation and rides from her sister for the foreseeable future. Her master's program was entering its final phase, demanding more of her already scarce time and energy. On the second Saturday of the month, she arrived at the community center to find it unusually quiet. No children waiting outside. No parents chatting in the hallway. Mr. Coleman greeted her with a conspiratorial smile. "They're all in the multi-purpose room today, Ms. Parker. Special request." Confused, Ellie made her way down the hall. The double doors to the multi-purpose room were closed, a handmade sign reading, "Enter here, Ms. Parker," taped at eye level. Her pulse quickened as she pushed open the doors. Inside, she found all 5 of her students, their parents, Principal Dawson, and even her sister Maggie, standing in a semicircle, faces alight with barely contained excitement. "What's going on?" Ellie asked, clutching her satchel closer to her body. Sandra stepped forward. "Ellie, for the past 8 months, you've given our children something precious. Your time, your knowledge, your heart, expecting nothing in return." Marcus's father continued, "You've driven that old car of yours back and forth every weekend, never complaining, never missing a session, even as it was falling apart. You've changed our children's lives," added Kayla's mother. Kayla went from hating school to loving it. Her regular teachers can't believe the transformation. Ellie's eyes began to sting with tears. "I don't know what to say. It's been my privilege, truly. We wanted to show our appreciation," Sandra said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "So we did something." Jamie stepped forward, holding a small gift box. "It's from all of us, Ms. Parker." With shaking hands, Ellie opened the box. Inside lay a car key with a familiar logo she recognized immediately. Her head snapped up in disbelief. "No," she whispered. "You didn't?" Principal Dawson stepped aside, revealing a side door that led to the parking lot. "Why don't you go see for yourself?" In a daze, Ellie followed them outside, where, bathed in the pale November sunlight, stood a cherry-red 1965 Mustang convertible. Not brand new, but lovingly restored, gleaming with promise and possibility. Her knees went weak. "I don't understand," she managed, though the key in her palm felt very real. Sandra explained, "We all contributed what we could. Marcus's dad found it and coordinated the restoration work. The school board pitched in when Principal Dawson told them about your program. Even the community center donated. But this is too much. I can't accept—" "You can and you will," Maggie interrupted, wrapping an arm around her sister's shoulders. "Because you deserve it, and because it would make David so happy to see you driving the car you both dreamed of." The mention of David's name broke something open inside Ellie. Tears flowed freely now as she approached the car, their car, the dream they'd shared, running her fingers along its perfect contours. "Look inside," Jamie urged, practically bouncing with excitement. On the passenger seat lay a framed photograph, one she'd never seen before. It showed all 5 students holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Ms. Parker," surrounded by mathematical equations, grammar rules, and colorful drawings. "Test drive?" Marcus's father suggested, holding out his hand for the keys to unlock the driver's side door. In a trance, Ellie slid behind the wheel, inhaling the scent of leather and possibility. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, and for a fleeting moment, she felt David's presence beside her, his voice in her ear. "Live, Ellie. It's time to start living again." She turned the key. The engine purred to life with a healthy rumble that vibrated through her body like music. "What do you think?" Sandra asked, leaning into the open window. Words failed her. Instead, Ellie reached out and squeezed Sandra's hand, then looked at the semicircle of faces, her students, their parents, her colleagues, her sister, all beaming with the special joy that comes from giving someone exactly what they need exactly when they need it. "I think," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion, "that I'm the luckiest teacher in the world." The following Saturday, Ellie arrived at the community center in her Mustang, the car drawing admiring glances and excited waves from her students. As she opened the trunk to retrieve her teaching materials, she paused, struck by the symbolism of the moment. The car represented more than transportation. It was a bridge between her past and future, between loss and renewal. That day's tutoring session was the best yet. Ellie brought a special project, a time capsule for each student to fill with their academic goals, dreams, and a letter to their future selves. As they worked, she wrote her own letter, sealing promises to herself, to her students, and to David's memory inside. During the lunch break, she found herself sitting beside Jamie on the community center's front steps, both of them enjoying the unseasonably warm November day. "Ms. Parker?" Jamie's voice was hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Are you happy now? With the car and everything?" The question, so simple yet profound from a 12-year-old, made her pause. For 2 years, happiness had seemed like a foreign country, visible on a distant horizon but unreachable. "I am," she realized, the truth of it spreading through her chest like warmth. Not because of the car itself, though it's wonderful, but because of what it represents. The kindness behind it, the connections. Jamie nodded solemnly. "That's good. Because my dad always said that helping other people is important, but letting other people help you is important too." Tears pricked at Ellie's eyes. "Your dad was a very wise man." "Yeah," Jamie agreed. "He would have liked you a lot." The following spring, Ellie's weekend tutoring program had expanded to 15 students. The community center provided a larger room, and 2 of Ellie's colleagues had volunteered to help. The cherry red Mustang became a familiar sight in the parking lot, often surrounded by excited children when she arrived. On a perfect May morning, Ellie stood in the empty classroom before her students arrived, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden rectangles on the freshly waxed floor. On her desk sat a framed quotation, a gift from Sandra and Jamie. "To teach is to touch a life forever." She ran her fingers over the frame, thinking of the lives she'd touched and those who had touched hers in return. The children who showed up every Saturday, eager to learn. The parents who had seen her need and responded with extraordinary generosity. Her sister, who had never stopped believing she would find her way back to joy. And David, whose love had shaped her even in absence. The sound of approaching footsteps and laughter echoed down the hallway. Ellie picked up her chalk and turned toward the board, ready to write the day's first lesson. Her heart felt full, unbroken in a new way, not because the cracks had disappeared, but because they had been filled with something precious and unexpected. As her students filed in, faces bright with potential and trust, Ellie Parker knew with absolute certainty that this moment, this work, this life, was exactly where she was meant to be. The teacher who had spent weekends tutoring struggling kids for free had received far more than a dream car in return. She had received the greatest gift of all, a second chance at living with an open heart. And that was worth more than all the Mustangs in the world.